Okay, I'm gonna need to leave early today. I don't know if I'll be able to finish what I want to finish, but we'll try to get there. I believe about 6:10. We're gonna start Samach Ches Amud Aleph, and what is it, about 11 lines up, maybe? Itmar. That's 68. 68A. Let me mute. Okay. Thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. And in the schus of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash also in the merit and memory of the Druin's mother who passed away. Okay. I don't have any information about the Levaya or anything. They didn't post it, I don't think. Okay, this is where we're holding. So far, we had a statement from Rav that Yiyush, when the original owner gives up hope, that's such a strong, so effective by him giving up hope that the Ganav acquires it right then, even if he didn't change even if the name hasn't changed, even if he didn't change the item itself, just the fact that he gave up hope. Now, if that's the case, then if the owner had given up hope, then when the thief slaughters it or sells it, then you won't have to pay 4 or 5 times because he sold and slaughtered his own item. Okay, so it goes like this: if the sale that the thief does, when the thief sells the ox or the lamb, if he sells it before Yiyush, which according to Rav, that would be the only time that you'd have to pay 4 or 5 times. But we have a machlekes now according to Rav Nachman and according to Rav Sheshis. Both of them hold that Yiyush is not kaina, that Yiyush does not affect the transfer of ownership. However, Rav Nachman Amar Chayiv, if it's before Yiyush, Rav Nachman says that's when you're Chayiv, which that's actually what Rav held as well. Rav Sheshis Amar Pater, Rav Sheshis says that you're exempt before Yiyush. We're going to see why. Rav Nachman Amar Chayiv, Rav Nachman says Chayiv, Umachrei Amar Rachmana. It says if you sell it, Ba'azavin, and he sold it. When we read the text, we did not notice that it said only if it's before Yiyush, only if it's after Yiyush. It didn't make that distinction. It said if he sells it, so he sold it. And it says you have to pay 4 or 5 times, depending on if it's an ox or a lamb. There's no difference if the original owner had given up hope or not. Rav Sheshis Amar Pater, Rav Sheshis, no, he's exempt if it's going to be before Yiyush. Why? The only time that he has to pay the 4 or 5 times is after Yiyush. Why? Because then when he sells it, then it's a valid sale. When he sells it before Yiyush, so there's no transfer of ownership. He sold him the Brooklyn Bridge. He sold him something that wasn't even his. But now when there was Yiyush and he sells it, so that's actually a transfer. Even though Yiyush itself, according to Rav Sheshis, does not make an acquisition, however, Yiyush together with a changing of owner, the original owner has given up. Plus the thief has now sold it. That does change the possession. Who owns it? So because Yiyush, but if it's before Yiyush, the Layani Maisa, before the original owner gave up hope, then there's no sale. Then Lay Mechayev is not obligated to meet the tzvicha because it needs to be similar to slaughtering. The Hana Maisa, we needed that it should be effective, the sale. According to Rav Sheshis, sells it before Yiyush, there was no sale, and therefore he's not chayiv. According to Rav Nachman, it doesn't have to be effective, the sale. He just has to attempt to make a sale. That's already going to make him chayiv. Amar Rav Sheshis says, Mina Minala, how do I know that I'm correct? That it has to be only after Yiyush? He says, because the Tanya was taught in a brayso from Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, why someone that steals has to pay 4 or 5 times after he sells it or slaughters it? Because he's strengthening the sin. Now, Amos, when is this? If it's before the original owner gave up hope, then is he really strengthening the sin? He's not even accomplishing a sale. He's doing nothing. So elalav lacha yeshua must be to strengthen the sin means that he's actually accomplishing something here, and that would be after yesh when he makes the sale. Then the ownership transfers from the thief to from the original owner to the thief, transferring it now to the purchaser. Amar Rava. Rava says it's not necessarily a real proof because it doesn't mean nishtarish, doesn't mean that it's strengthened. It just means that it repeated the sin. And so even though it wasn't effective, he still has to pay 4 or 5 times. And that would be what Reb Nachman held. Tashema, come listen. He slaughters it and he sells it, or he sells it. Just like the tvicha never goes back, the life never goes back to the animal after it's slaughtered. So to after the sale, it doesn't go back. Must be that it's a valid sale. Rav Sheshes is correct. If it's before he gave up hope, why doesn't it go back? It must be after years, after the original owner gave up hope. So we see very clear from this that it's only going to be when it's effective, when it's going to be after years. That's when the sale is going to be effective. That's when he's going to have to pay. Rav Nachman would respond to this, and this is what we learned yesterday. That Rav Nachman says, "Prat l'sheikin leishleishim yom." It doesn't mean that the sale needs to be effective. And what we're saying is that it has to be a sale. We're on the last line of Samach Chesed. It has to be a sale that's a real sale, not a rental. When it said mechira she'ena chezeres, it means it can't be like a matana manas lahachzer type of thing. I'm selling it to you for 30 days. And Rabbi Elazar also holds that the chiyuv is lacher yesh, which means that Rabbi Elazar holds like Rav Sheshes. Rabbi Elazar says, Teda, I'll bring you a proof. You should know. Shestam geneva yesh bailamu. That when someone steals something, automatically, or not automatically, like without any the default. The default is after a theft, the owner gives up hope. That's what Rabbi Elazar says. That's the default. Because the Torah says, someone stole an ox or a lamb and then he slaughtered it or sold it, he has to pay 4 or 5 times. But so Rabbi Elazar says, how do you know he has to pay 4 or 5 times? Maybe the original owner didn't give up hope, and then therefore the sale was nothing. It must be because it must be that the default is the Torah is assuming that the original owner gave up hope, and that's why he has to pay 4 or 5 times because the sale was effective. Which means that Rabbi Elazar, who is the great sage of Eretz Yisrael, is going to follow the opinion also of Rav Sheshes that says that the sale needs to be effective in order for him to have to pay 4 or 5 times, as opposed to Rav Nachman that says the sale doesn't have to be effective. Could be even before years. The Dilma, the Gemara says, this is a kasha on Rabbi Elazar. How do you know that the Torah really means that the sale has to be effective, and he gave up hope? That he's proving, Rabbi Elazar was proving that the default is that the owner gives up hope. How do you know that? Maybe you're chayiv to pay even if the sale wasn't effective. Amri leisal kadaitach. Don't think like that. Because we want it to be similar to the slaughtering. So just like when he slaughters it, obviously the slaughtering is effective. So too, also the sale has to be effective. And if it's before the original owner gave up hope of ever getting it back, then Mayahanut, then the sale wasn't effective. Gemara says maybe you still don't have a proof that the default is that every theft, the original owner gives up hope. Dilma, maybe the case that the Torah is talking about is the Shamin and the Yayash. We actually heard that he gave up hope. We heard the guy saying, maybe that's the case of the Torah. How do you know? Amri leisal kadaitach. Don't think like that. It has to be similar to the slaughtering. Alter. Just like immediately when he, after the theft, he could slaughter it, and that would be not valid, but that would be that he would have to pay 4 or 5 times. Af Mechir Alter, also the sale should be immediately after the theft. You could immediately sell it, even though we didn't hear yet that the original owner gave up hope. You would still have to pay 4 or 5 times. Okay, so that's the proof that Rabbi Elazar would follow the opinion of Rav Sheshas that we need to have Yush before the sale of the oxid lamb. Amalei Rabbi Yechanan says to Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Elazar were contemporaries. Rabbi Elazar was considered a student, Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Yechanan. Yeah, I turned the page after Itmar, and I'm by Amalei Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan says, Geneva b'nefesh techiach. I'll prove it to you that you don't need Yush in order to you don't need an effective sale in order for this to in order for the obligation of 4 or 5 times. Because what happens if someone kidnaps a human being and he sells him? So the rule is that there's a death penalty for kidnapping and selling. Well, the problem is, who's the owner of the person that he kidnapped? The person himself. And the person himself, who's the owner of himself, doesn't give up hope on himself. He hopes that somehow something's going to happen. There's no Yish Bailam, and nevertheless, that sale causes that the kidnapper gets a death penalty. Okay, Michlal. This implies the Sav Rabbi Yechanan lifnei Yish Chayav lachi. Okay, obviously Rabbi Yechanan holds that when would the obligation of the 4 or 5 times be? Even before Yish. We just proved it. Because he holds that if someone tries to sell of someone that he kidnapped, so then he's chayiv misa. Either sale is not effective, but the attempt was. He still attempted. So too, the same thing is by the animal. If he attempts to sell the animal, even though there was no yish bailam, the owners didn't give up hope, so therefore the sale is not effective, still belongs to the original owner. But nevertheless, that attempt would make him have to pay 4 or 5 times. Okay, so we know that Rabbi Yechanan holds that. The question is, la'acha yish mai. What does Rabbi Yechanan hold after yish? So Rashi over here explains. Does Rabbi Yechanan hold like Rav? That if there's yish, if the original gives up hope, then he's going to be exempt from the 4 or 5 times, because what's he actually selling? His own item. He's not selling. He has a debt to the thief. The thief has a debt to the original owner, but the item itself, the animal itself, belongs to him if there was yish. And maybe after yish, he's not going to be chayav. Or maybe we say that the yish itself doesn't create the acquisition. Yish together with the sale makes it belong to the new person. It's a combination. Maybe that's what Rabbi Yechanan holds, and that's our question here. Well, Lachi Yishmai, Rabbi Yechanan Amar Chayev. Rabbi Yechanan actually says that you chayev on both, which means he does not hold like Rav. He holds that there's a combination that would make him acquire it, make the purchaser acquire the animal. Reish Lakish Amar Pater, Reish Lakish actually holds like Rav. Reish Lakish says that the only time that there's going to be an obligation of 4 or 5 times is before the original owner gave up hope. Afterwards, it belongs to the thief, and there's going to be no obligation. Rabbi Yechanan, Amar Chayev. Rabbi Yechanan says that he's Chayev even after Yish. The obligation to pay 4 or 5 times doesn't matter if there was Yish or if there wasn't Yish, before or after. Rish Lakish Amar Pater, Rish Lakish says that he's exempt. The Chiyav, the obligation to pay 4 or 5 times is only before the Yish. Because exactly the opinion of Rav, that if there was already Yish, then we're going to say that he just sold his own item. He doesn't have to pay 4 or 5 times for selling his own item. How did he get it? I know he got it through theft, but now it's his, and he just owes a debt, the monetary value of it, to the original owner. But now what he's selling is his item. He doesn't have to pay 4 or 5 times.
Kind of got out of that.
Yeah. Isri Rabbi Yechanan Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yechanan has a question to Reish Lakish. It's basically a question on Reish Lakish. It's also a question on Rav. What are you saying, that you acquire it from Yish, and then when you sell it, there's no payment? 1 second. Ganav, if someone stole v'hikdish, and then he was makdish it, v'achkach tavach, then he slaughtered it after he was makdish it. He consecrated it. Mishal tashlumei kefil. He has to pay double. Why does he have to pay double? Because when he stole it, He has to pay double to the owner. But he doesn't have to pay 4 or 5 times. Because 4 or 5 times would have to go to the hektish. And the hektish never got the kefil. So you only pay kefil to your friend. Shalim l'reyeyu. You don't pay kefil to hektish. So if that's the case, so you don't have to pay that 4 or 5 times. Amos, we ask, when did this take place? When did he do the slaughtering? Ilem or the makdashet. Ilem lifnei yesh. If we say that he did all of this before yesh, mi kadosh, would he actually have consecrated the animal if the original owner didn't give up hope? Ishki yakdish espeisai kaidash amarachmana. The Eberster says that if a man consecrates the items of his house to be holy, ma beisish shalai afkol shalai. He can only consecrate it if it's his. He can't consecrate something that doesn't belong to him. So how could he consecrate this animal if he doesn't own it yet? It must be that he consecrated after the original owner given up hope. So why doesn't he have to pay 4 or 5 times? The reason is because he was makdishet. That's when he doesn't have to pay. Why doesn't he have to pay 4 or 5 times, even though the original owner gave up hope? Because he consecrated it. The hektish katavach, because he just slaughtered an animal that belongs to hektish. However, avalei hektish, but if he didn't, it wasn't makdishet, even though the original owner gave up hope. Tavach, if you slaughtered it, you'd have to pay 4 or 5 times. Rabbi Yechanan finishes this question with a punch. He says, if you Reish Lakish think yesh kaina that the giving up hope would already automatically make it acquired to the thief. Why should he have to pay? Spells it out. Spells out his question. He shouldn't have to pay anything. He sold his own item. According to Reish Lakish. Amar Lei, so Reish Lakish responds to this. We're not talking about that the Ganav was makdashit. The Ganav can't be makdashit. Either the original didn't give up hope, or the original did. Well, if the original did give up hope, then it has nothing to do with paying 4 or 5 times. We're talking about that the original owner did not give up hope. So how was he able to makdashit? Because he wasn't makdashit. The original owner was makdashit. He saw that someone took it. He says, "Well, let me make it hektish. I don't have it anyway." Or maybe I'll never get it back. I'm making it hektish. No, he can't be that he says, maybe I'll never get it back, because that's called giving up hope. It must be that he decided to make it hektish. Right? So he made it hektish. Now the Gemara asks, can he really make it hektish when it's in the house of the Ganav? And I know he wants to get it back, but can he really do that? Rabbi Yechanan says, if someone was robbed, he stole something, and the owner didn't give up hope. Both people cannot make it hektish. This one can't make it hektish because the robber can't make it hektish because he doesn't own it. And the owner can't make it hektish because he doesn't have it in his domain. Yeah, so we had a case like that.
Yeah. I feel like there's been plenty of times previously where a guy can make me hektish when it's not in front of him.
Yeah, but it can't be. We had cases where a person can say that something that I have back at home should be truma on this food that I'm eating right now because I'm on a trip. We had that. That's because it's in his property. Well, that's the other. There was another opinion that was concerned that maybe the family is not going to know or something. There were other concerns. But Rabbi Yechanan says that if it's not in his property because someone has actually removed it from his property, so then he can't be makdashet. The question is over here, how could Reish Lakish explain the case that we're talking about where the original owner was makdashet after the thief has already taken it? Rabbi Yechanan says that you can't do that. No, I know Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish are arguing, but they're arguing about something else. They're arguing about if yish is kaina. They're not arguing about if someone can be makdash something that's not in his domain. So the Gemara says, "Hu damar kitznuin." Rish Lakish would be talking about, or maybe that Brisa would be talking about like the way that Tznuin hold. The Tanan, the Tznuin are the people that are very careful. Tznuin literally means modest, but it means like they're more, what is that?
Yakish.
I don't know if it means Yakish, but how they translate it there? Discreet. Okay. It says like this. Started in the Mishnah. We're talking about Kerem Revai. We're talking about fruits that are a grapevine that had grown for 3 years, which the original 3 years, all the grapes are not allowed to have, you're not allowed to benefit from. In the 4th year, you have to take all the fruits to Jerusalem. Now, what's going to happen is there's a concern that maybe people are going to take them and they're going to end up eating it, and they didn't bring it to Jerusalem. So the person that wants to protect everyone from doing an Aveira. So what they do is, they take money. We'll see the whole Mishnah in a moment on the next page. But meanwhile, this is just the end of it. It says that the Tznuin would take money, and they would say, Kol Nilkat, means anything that was removed from my field, that was Kerem Revai, that was the 4th year, should be redeemed with this money, which means that they're taking the holiness, the holiness off the fruit, putting it on the money, and then you could just like Meiser Sheni, you could redeem it and take it to Jerusalem. So too with those fruits, you could redeem it and you take it to Jerusalem. This is for Kerem Revai, the 4th year of the fruits. Now, what we just brought out by saying this is that even though the fruits are not in his domain, because someone has already entered the property, taken the fruits for himself, but nevertheless the original owner is able to redeem those fruits. Now the assumption here in the Gemara is that what the Gemara's the basic comparison is that if he's able to redeem the fruits, to remove the hektish, he can also be makdish it. So this brisa that's saying ganav hektish, that he's able, that the original owner is able to be makdish it, even though it's not in his domain, is following that other opinion of the Tznuim that hold that you can remove the kedusha even though it's not in your rishus. So too over here, you can make it kodesh even though it's not in your rishus, and that's it. How did it become hekdesh if there was no yish? Because the original owner was makdish it inside the domain of the thief, and this opinion allows that. Rabbi Yochanan didn't paskin like this opinion. This opinion allows that, so that's how it matches up. The Gemara says if that's the case, you have a problem. Why do you have to pay kefel if when the original owner is makdish it, what he just did was he grabbed it back from the thief by saying that it's hektish. So why do you have to pay kefel? He got the original back. Now he didn't get it into his domain, but because he made it hektish, and wherever it is, it belongs to God, even in another person's property. But it's as if he got it back. Oh, everything belongs to Hashem, exactly. So since he made it that it belongs to Hashem, and it happens to be in someone else's house, but so what? The Ganav was never caught with a stolen item. When does a Ganav have to be kefil if he's caught with a stolen item? Here he has an item that was belongs to Hashem and happens to be in his house. Gemara says Kashamad Badin. No, we're talking about where he made it hektish after there was already a court case. Okay, it was already caught. So then it's going to have to be kefil. What's the case? If the Bezdin has told the thief, go and give it to him, my area hektish, then why do we have to say that he was makdish it? I feel like hektish nami leilachayve, and he shouldn't be chayiv even if he wasn't makdish it. Why? Because we're talking about the 4 or 5 times. Why do we say he doesn't have to pay 4 or 5 times? Because the person was consecrated. I mean, if he didn't consecrate it, he shouldn't have to pay. The reason is, Damarava tzei, if the Bezdin says, go and give it to him, and then the person, instead of giving it to him, is tabach hamachar, he goes right away to the butcher shop and he slaughters it or he sells it on the way, he's pater, he's exempt. And the reason is, my timer, even the Paskul Mil say, since the Bezdin already paskin, tabach hamachar v'lei gazlan, when he goes ahead and slaughters it or sells it, he becomes a robber he used to be a thief. he took it in the middle of the night. But now that now that he was caught, and the Bezdin says you have to return it, and instead of returning it, he slaughters it. Now he's a robber. The robber does it in open, and the robber doesn't pay the 4 or 5 times. Only a ganav pays the 4 or 5 times. The robber doesn't pay kefil, doesn't pay double. Only the thief pays double. However, but if the Bezdin didn't say tain, like go and give it to him, the Bezdin just said, okay, the obligation is to give it, but they didn't actually say, now you go and do it. So then, then he still has to pay the 4 or 5 times. My timer, given like Pascha Milsa, since the verdict wasn't out, Akati Ganavu, still considered a Ganav. So what we're talking about now is like tzricha. We're only talking about like the Bezdin said you're obligated. The Bezdin didn't say to go do it. The Bezdin just said the obligation is to do it. So then it's going to be a Ganav. And if there was hektish, then he's not going to have to pay the 4 or 5 times. And if there wasn't hektish, then he would have to pay the 4 or 5 times. But we're talking about that it was in the hands of the thief when the original owner made it hektish. Okay, Gufa.
Is a Ghana of can we insinuate that a Ghana works in a Gazlan?
Yeah, because the Gazlan isn't afraid of people. He's not afraid of Hashem, but he's not afraid of people either. So we don't put it like, oh, so
he doesn't have to pay kefil.
Doesn't have to pay kefil, but the Ganav is afraid of people and he's not afraid of Hashem. So we make him pay. He tries to do it in a way that he's never seen. Gufa. Let's return to something that we mentioned in passing. Rabbi Yechanan said, I don't know how far we're going to get in this. Maybe I should leave it. Okay, let's see how far I can get. I have another 10 minutes and then I have to run. Yeah. Who can do the share tomorrow? Wherever I leave off.
Someone who starts with the Y class name.
He's good. He has the accounting experience.
Rabbi Yechanan says, if someone stole an owner's think of a pope, both the thief and the original owner can't make it consecrated. The thief, because it was never acquired to him, because the original owners didn't give up hope. And also the original owner can't be makdashit because it's not in his domain. It has to be in his domain. Does Rabbi Yechanan really say this? Rabbi Yechanan said Allah like a stam mishnah, and we're about to quote the mishnah that we said before about the tznuim, that those people that were able to take away a holiness even though it wasn't in their domain. The Tanana was taught, we're going to do the whole Mishnah now. The Kerem Revai, when we're dealing with fruits of the 4th year that need to be taken to Jerusalem, I said, because it's Adama, they used to put a simon around it with a little raised area of dirt. Simana ki Adama, it should know that it's just like dirt. Ma Adamikana, when just like this dirt, you can plow and you can get benefits from it if, things can grow from it. Potting soil, something. Afhainami, this also kimifrika, if you're going to redeem it, you can have benefits from it. So that was the sign. Shal Arla, let's say there was a field that all the trees in it were Arla the first 3 years. Then they would make a sign around it with clay. Simana kecharsis, it's just like clay. Just like you can't grow anything in the clay. The soil is, but can't deal with the water. So Afhai, the less behanamine, also this fruits you can't have any benefit from. Shel kvaris, let's say there's a grave there. Besid, they would put limestone. Simana de chiver katzamis. This would show a sign that it turns white, just like the limestone is white, just like the bones turn white. That's a simon. So in others, if you see something like this, you know what's going on in the field. They would grind up the limestone and pour it over the grave or around the grave. That it should be very white. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, when would we say that they would do all these things to keep people out? That's b'shvius. That's only in the 7th year. Why? Because in the 7th year, people are allowed to walk on anyone's field and they're going to end up taking the fruits. They have to, because it's ownerless. But the other 7 years, which means the other 6 years, you could feed the wicked one and let him die, which means that if he's a thief, he doesn't belong there anyway. We're not putting up signs for thieves. By the way, thief, please don't eat this. There's a rule against it. But Tnuin, however, the Tnuin, this is what we learned before. What was the term you used for Tnuin? The discreet ones would put down the money, and they would say, anything that was collected from this should be redeemed with this money that we have right here. Okay, so now if that's the case, that Rabbi Yochanan holds halacha kastam mishnah, like an anonymous mishnah. This is an anonymous mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan says halacha is like an anonymous mishnah. He must hold that you're allowed to redeem hektish even though it's not in your domain. These people are doing that; they're redeeming the hektish even though, so which means you could probably consecrate it even if it's not in your domain. We have an answer. It's not an anonymous mishnah. We had an opinion before. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Maybe it's Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that followed up with that and said, "This is what the Tznuim did." It's not an anonymous mishnah. Let's skip the parentheses. Rabba Barbachan Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Barbachan says the name Rabbi Yochanan. Kol makom shana Rab Shimon ben Gamliel mishnah saying, "Halacha k'maisei." You're not getting too far because I know Rabbi Yochanan says halacha k'stam mishnah. Maybe this isn't a stam mishnah, but who is it? It's Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Well, guess what? Rabbi Yochanan says halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, except for in 3 places, which is chutz miyarav etzid and v'rei achrayna. Okay, those are the 3 places that the halacha is not like him, but this is not one of those. So the halacha should be like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, which would mean that the halacha is that he can consecrate it, even though it's not in his domain. Amri leitei mekala nilkat. What we're going to say is, don't say that anything that has been gathered from this field, which means in the past tense, it's already been gathered, which means that the person already has it. It should be redeemed. Elaim, or rather, you should say anything that will be taken from this field will be redeemed, which means it's still in his domain when he's redeeming it. So Rabbi Yochanan never said that you can redeem something or you can consecrate something that's not in your domain. Okay. Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? That anything that will be redeemed. Rabbi Yochanan says that sometimes we have this thing. It's called shita, where they line up a list of sages that all say the same thing. So Rabbi Yochanan said that the Tnuim, these discrete ones, and Reb Daisa said the same thing. Well, what does Reb Daisa say? Reb Daisa nilkat Kamma. Reb Daisa says that anything that has been collected, which means that it's already out of the domain. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Now this is regarding leket. Leket is when poor people come into a field. They're allowed to collect 2 stalks that have fallen, but they're not allowed to collect 3 stalks that are fallen. Only 2. If 2 stalks fell, they're allowed to take it. 3 not. Now not everyone knows that halacha. Rabbi Yudaimer, the Tanya was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yudaimer says Shachris Balabayas Aymed Vaimer. In the morning, the Balabayas says Kol Shiyil Ketuaniyim Hayom Yeh Hefker. Anything that the poor people will collect today will be hefker. That means he says it about the future. He still owns it. But what he wants to do is he wants to make that the poor people that don't know the halacha, that are going to take 3 stalks that are fallen, should not be stealing. So he says, let them keep it. And he says it before they take it, while it's still in his domain. It's well towards the evening, where he says, Kol shalaktu aniyim yehefker. Anything that the niyim have taken should be hefker, which means that it's after the fact that he's going back and making it hefker, after they've already taken it. Which means he can do it even out of his domain, which probably means that the Tnuim were saying the same thing, that he can do it out of his domain, which means that he can make it hektish even when it's out of his domain, which contradicts what Rabbi Yochanan said. The Gemara says, Eipach, Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Daisa. Let's switch the opinions between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Daisa. Where Rabbi Yehuda said in the morning, Rabbi Daisa said in the evening, let's switch it. Where now Rabbi Daisa said in the morning, he says it before they collected it, so it's still in his domain. Rabbi Daisa and the Tnuim said the same thing, where it's still in his domain. Rabbi Daisa le Rabbi Yehuda, we'll switch Rabbi Daisa and Rabbi Yehuda. Why are you changing the brisa or the Mishnah? Why don't you switch Rabbi Yochanan? Why don't you say that just that the Tnuim and Rabbi Yehuda, who said in the morning, said the same thing? If you want to get the same result, why do you have to change the names in a brisa? So it says Amri no, we have to change the brisa. The reason is because because over here it says this Rabbi Yehuda Breira. The Rabbi Yehuda holds a Breira. Now, Breira would mean retroactive designation, right? If we say that it's in the morning, then Rabbi Yehuda is saying that anything that the poor people will take, that means when they take it, then retroactively, it's going to now be hefker from what he said it in the morning. So it's already been designated as hefker. We don't know what it is yet until they come. When they come and take it, then what he said in the morning is retroactively hefker. So Vishamin Rabbi Yehuda ba'almad l'slei breira, but we know that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold a breira. Where do we know that from? That's like if someone buys wine from kutim, which are people that don't take shumas and meisers, and in it's Erev Shabbos, and he needs to make kiddush, so he has to fix it up, but he doesn't have time to do it. But he says, you can't separate it on Shabbos. He has to get it all done before Shabbos. It says 2 lugim that I'm going to separate Hari and Truma. That's like 2 out of 100. Right? Truma is 2%. Asara Maiserishan. 10 of it is going to be Maiserishan. It's going to be the tithe. Test Maiser Sheni. 9 of it will be the second tithe because he only has 90 left. 88 actually. But Umechal v'shoysim miyad, and then he redeems the Maiser Sheni and he can drink it. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Shimon say you can't do that because even though afterwards when you're going to separate it, it's going to be retroactive. That's what you really meant. But we don't say that you go back retroactively and do that retroactive designation. You say that what you're drinking right now is a mixture of everything. We don't say that later on when you're going to separate it. So Rabbi Yehuda does not hold a prayer. So therefore, we have to switch Rabbi Yehuda to say not that he said it in the morning, what's later on going to be taken, but what he said in the evening, what was taken should be hefker. Okay. Amri safe. You switch the brisa because you have a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Hashtanami kasha de Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan, but you still have a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. The Amrit, because you said Rabbi Yochanan loitei makala nilka dalei makala mislake. If you say Rabbi Yochanan says, don't say anything that has already been collected. Say something that will be collected, which means that Rabbi Yochanan's not talking about when it's out of his domain. He's talking about when it's still in his domain. He's making it hefker al mislei breira. That means that Rabbi Yochanan holds of breira. But Rabbi Yochanan mislei breira. But we have a proof that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold of breira. Retroactive designation. Where do we see that? The Marabasi Rabbi Yochanan nachim shechalku lekuchasein machzin lezel zebi yovel. The 2 brothers are dividing up an inheritance. We say that at Yovel, it goes back to being in the estate, and they have to redivide it after Yovel. Why? Because we don't say that what each brother took was the original inheritance. We say each brother is actually purchasing off each other. Now, if it would be the original inheritance, that would be that breira. But Rabbi Yochanan says that we don't say breira. We don't say that what they ended up getting was the original designation retroactive. We don't say that. Really, what we're going to have to say is anything that has been collected, because Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold of breira. Rabbi Yochanan, where did he get this rule that says that you're not allowed to be makdir something when it's not in your domain? That is, the Tanan, he has a Mishnah. Now, he has one Mishnah that said, stam, that you're allowed to do it, but you're allowed to redeem something even though it's out of your domain. But he has another one that says that when it's out of his domain, he's not allowed to. It says, someone that steals from a thief doesn't have to pay double. Why not? He doesn't have to pay to the first thief. You know that the thief doesn't make the money, doesn't make the double thing. You only have to, if it's stolen from the original owner, you don't pay the thief double. But why doesn't he pay to the original owner? It must be this. The reason is because this one doesn't own it, and this one it's not in his domain. Okay, which means that when something's not in his domain, then he doesn't have any rights over it. What proved to Rabbi Yochanan that he went after this stam? He should have gone after the other stam that says, the other anonymous Mishnah that says that you're allowed to do something even when it's out of your domain. You could make it hektish. Because he was also following the pasuk. The pasuk seems to support that when it's out of your domain, you can't make it hektish. The ishki hektish is basic kaidash Hashem. A person makes his house kaidash for Hashem. Ma basic b'shusay, just like his house is in his domain. Afkol b'shusay, you can only consecrate something when it's in his domain. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Wow, thank you.
Woo!
Wow.
Sorry for